Welcome to another episode of the Dentology Podcast, where we discuss the business of dentistry. In this podcast series, we'll be discussing all the non-clinical aspects of dentistry, from goodwill values, finance, marketing, how to buy and sell a dental practice, mindset, through to where you can invest your money in team management issues. My name is Andy Acton, and I'm joined by my co-host, Chris Strevens. Let's jump straight into it. No shortage of gems from Ben there.
No, brilliant. It's lovely, isn't it? I mean, fascinating interest. There's this social justice thing that runs through everything he does, really. Even down to his honey.
Yeah, we hear the phrase a lot, don't we? You know, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And I think that almost kind of typifies Ben and what he's about and the things he's done. And, you know, caring's deeply important, but also how he used dyslexia to his advantage, and that really impacted how he communicates and that nuance. And without doubt, that has contributed to his success massively.
I think so, and I think that, as he says, you know, the biggest skill you can ever learn is communication. You know, communication, whether it be with patients, whether it be with family, whether it be with friends, you know, wives, husbands. You know, quite often they say, don't they, a lot of marital issues can be solved if people learn how to talk about them and stuff like that. It's fascinating, really.
Yeah, and the business success he had in a relatively short period of time. You know, we didn't have long to dig into the detail, but he skiffled through what he achieved. Quite remarkable.
And doing things that other people didn't want to do. I think that's the interesting thing, isn't it? You know, the people with those contracts that they were offered, but no one went for them. But he went for them because he saw he could do something and deliver them.
And a really interesting outlook on how NHS dentistry can be delivered and pointed in the direction of the most needy in society. Really, really interesting.
It was brilliant. Really good conversation.
So, we are here again.
We are yet again, another episode.
It is.
Dun, 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 dun.
Today, we are delighted to be joined by Dr Ben Atkins. And Ben is a dentist, a ex-multiple practice owner, nice clinical advisor, and also a beekeeper, which we'll come on to at some point. Morning, Ben. How are you doing?
Morning, guys. Hi, Andy. Chris, how's it down there in the sunny smoke?
Lovely. Not so sunny at the moment, I must admit, but not raining, so that's good.
Yeah, we've had some proper autumnal weather recently, haven't we? With the rain and the wind and everything else, it's been quite bizarre, really.
So it's a time to go and watch football matches.
Yes.
I always said to my son, if you go and watch a football match in the rain, it makes you feel like you're a proper fan.
And you've actually done some exercise, so yeah.
Yeah, that's true. That is true.
Yeah. So to kick off, Ben, you say tongue-in-cheek that you're a stay-at-home dad with a glancing interest in dentistry, and clearly things have changed a lot over the last generation. Going back to your youth before we start, what were your teenage years like? What were the things that shaped you into the person you are today?
There's 2 or 3 different stories which I often revert back to. Is when you go to high school. My kids are lucky enough to go to a very nice private school. I was state school born and bred, and I've got a very big affinity to that non-entrance exam stuff. And we went into the high school, and you're setted for 2 things: if you can read, or with the set that I went into, you can't read proper. And there was 6 of us in this set. We could call ourselves the Rems because we were, and we couldn't read properly, and it was that, I suppose, that which actually was a bit of a difficulty since my mum's an English teacher. But no, I'm dyslexic, so and I think so that was a big learning factor about myself, about that challenge, is that every lesson was a challenge, and it was about, I think, one of those early learning things. You challenge yourself. It's not about everybody else. I see that with the work you guys do. It's about enjoying the journey. It's about what you get out of it. Because, I mean, besides being an Arsenal fan, it's absolutely it's important to believe in who you are.
Completely. Did you find out quite young that you were dyslexic, Ben? Because I'm just thinking, lots of people
never fully diagnosed.
Can I throw another one on top of that? Were you at school at the time they regarded you as dyslexic, or just a bit thick?
No, thick. Afterwards, I could see numbers. Numbers flew. They were dead easy. But I also took that as I've learned. I was just thick. I was thick until after university as well. You know, so I didn't even have that thing to hide behind at university. is it's that journey of challenge, and I think you'll find some real blue sky thinking businessmen. There are lots of names that we all know who are dyslexic, but they went through those challenges, and I think that built me as a person because you respect everybody else a little bit more. I did anyway, because I wasn't competed against. I didn't need to be. And the others, so I really enjoyed sciences at school because it wasn't reading, it was technical stuff. So I think that played to my strengths. And maths as well. I wasn't in the top sets, but I could see how to use numbers. And I think, well, my father was a bank manager, and with your guys' background, that's why I find your world so interesting, with numbers and stuff. Basically every single discussion in dentistry and business, I've got a housing business, I've got a car business, boils back to do the bottom line work. No matter what, no matter how much ethics you've got, whatever it is, it's got that bottom line's got to work. Otherwise, you're just doing a charitable thing. And we can all do charity, and we have to do charity. That's really, really important to give back to society. But I like to choose my charity, get charitable ask. And for me, it's not the NHS. You know, it's the NHS needs to support business wise as well, and it actually needs to be a value. It needs to be a value ask for the government. So then my journey, going back to childhood, the big turning point for me, when I look back at what happened, my insecurities come from when I was about 12 or 13. Bear with me on this story.
No, it's interesting. The thing is,
we were on a boat.
The thing is, I think this stuff is critical, because when we come on to the success you had,
it's understanding, isn't it?
That start point kind of gives people a real insight as to what were those triggers and those important elements.
Yeah, definitely.
I think our teenage years are so important.
Yeah, there are some big factors. Your parents, I can't swear on this thing, but they mess you up, and you mess your parents up, because that's who we are. And actually taking that capacity. So I learned from a young age that I needed, my whole business journey was to create capacity to be there for my kids. If I was going to have them. I needed time. Time's everything for what we do with everything in life. The more time, money's inconsequential. If you've got time, then you're a rich person. But so we were on this boat going out to across to, I think it was to Helsinki, from Stockholm. And Sweden was exactly how it was when we were kids. You know, it was a church trip, and it was we were living with a Swedish family, and it was an amazing experience. But Sweden was quite expensive back then. You know, it's
still is.
Yeah. But there's a reason why it's expensive, because they don't have massive mortgages, because they all live in state funded. So if we took all our money out of our mortgages and that disappeared, we'd all be wealthy here. So it gives you that, you've got more spendable cash, and I think that's interesting. But we were on this boat, and I had my pocket money, and I'd seen a box of chocolates I wanted to buy my mum. I'm very sweet, nice person, and I put this 5 krona piece in, and I hit the jackpot. You know, but as an 11, 12-year-old kid, we're not from an affluent background. My dad said I'd won about £1,000 in the 70s.
Wow.
You know, it was a huge, and the older boys who I was with said, "Oh, you might win it again if you put it back in." Oh. And I put every single penny back in.
No.
Every single penny went in. I was in tears. All I wanted was this box of chocolates. I'd won enough to buy all the boxes of chocolate. You know, it was a huge amount of money, because it was a sailboat jackpot. I probably shouldn't have been playing on it because I was like 12. It was 18 plus or whatever.
What year was this, Ben?
So I was born 75, so I'd be 12, so about 87, something like that, 85, 86. Wow. You know, so if you compare it back to a house in the UK in 80s, was 50 grand.
Yeah.
£1,000 was ridiculous
huge
money.
Amount of money.
Wow.
Yeah. And I put every single penny back in. So forever, that has affected me. I need control. It's control. I need to control the odds. Sounds daft, but that's my business practice all the way through my career. It was a defining moment. I can reflect back that it happened. I mean, you guys must have had a similar, why you went and did business. What was yours, Chris, what was there must have been one moment that you went back and
I think ours was, we worked our socks off, I think. So I worked in a bank and predominantly started a healthcare business. And then after a while, they moved me into head office to do all professions. And then Andy came sort of halfway through my tenure, maybe, I don't know. And we just happened to be sitting in a meeting where our managers were telling us this stuff they wanted, and we came out of the meeting and went, I think there's something in here. So we then basically, I don't know, 18 hours a day sorting out this massive great scheme for the bank, huge stuff, stuff outside of our control. Wasn't just writing a credit. That was the easiest thing, to get the credit line approved. Then we had to work out how to deliver this thing. So Andy and I were, we'd sit in countless meetings, weren't we, with insurers and operational people, learning stuff that we'd never dealt with. We got it off the ground and it made the bank millions, really, truly millions of pounds. And then they said to us, thanks.
We got a thanks for that.
That's really good of you. Thank you.
Done a good job.
And our boss said, I got a bonus. And we went, did we get a bonus?
Yeah.
No, but thanks very much. And that, for me, and our kids, I think that was the other thing, because we were working stupid hours.
It's funny what you say, Ben, about the wealthy man has time. And when we decided to buy the business, we said if we could maintain our earnings but have more time, that would be the biggest gift we'd ever receive. And for the first few years, we were still working as hard, but we could see a pathway where we'd have more time. Because I think you're right. I think there's always the opportunity to earn more money, because we could all work on a Sunday in Aldi or Morrison's. If it was that important, it's not. And I think for us, if we could create more time, because back then we both had young families, that would be the greatest thing ever. And we achieved that. And that I think, and having that kind of anchor, that root that says what's really important is the thing that gives you that kind of purpose beyond just doing your day job. So it wasn't massively dissimilar to you. I think time is
we just looked at it. We just said, I remember I've got 3 children, so I'm one behind Andy, but my middle daughter, my youngest daughter, said to my wife at one time, because working in the bank, we worked really hard, and she said to my wife, she said, who's my daddy? Because I don't get to, and it's like, you might as well just stab me.
Yeah, absolutely.
The only time I saw her was at the weekend, and that along with the fact that we were unhappy that we hadn't received any recognition for our financial recognition, those were the 2 catalysts. And we just said, well, I'll tell you what, why didn't we buy a business? And that was it.
I think in reality, I think everybody learns this. It's just when you learn it. And I think the earlier you learn it, the longer it gives you the opportunity to make use of it. So I was 28. When we bought the business, I was 28, 29. I had, so my eldest lad would have been 6. So I had a 6-year-old, a 3-year-old, and my wife was then pregnant with twins. So it was a very young family, but you make it work because you do.
I think you are far braver than me doing that when you got a family. I did it when I was a 24-year-old idiot. There's nothing else like that.
How old are you now as an idiot?
I'm 42 at the year.
We're back to that. No,
I'm not. I'm 47, but I keep saying I'm 42 because that's when the business went. But I feel that I'm in awe of people who take that risk whilst they've got children, because you're not just risking you, are you? It's almost from one side, it's almost so easy to say, I've got kids, I'm not doing it.
Yeah.
I agree up to a point, but I think there's also a train of thought that says by doing nothing, you risk everything. Because
absolutely.
Whilst from the outside looking in, it looks risky. We were able to manage the downside.
I think it was. I think we always say, don't we, that sometimes being naive in business is actually not a bad idea. And we took out a loan, didn't we? A good few £100,000, and friends would say, "Are you mad?" And we went, "No, it's going to be fine. It'll be fine." Our wives were, off you go. And then, can you remember? I remember we completed in October, and then December we didn't have any money. And we were like, this has suddenly come really quickly. And then we got over that hump. But I think we went into it with great confidence, just not thinking it was going to go wrong. But naivety, I think, comes there.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
So why did you choose dentistry? Because you said you looked around at the medical profession before choosing dentistry. Yeah. What was it that finally drew you to the world of teeth?
I see my son at the moment. He's into whittling, pencil knife. And
right. Right. Okay.
It's his go-to. I'm going to go and relax, Dad. He's out there making us a doorstop.
Wow.
Doorstop. And it's like he'll do, where's Graydon? And Magenta goes. My daughter's called Magenta, and she goes, "Oh, he's why do you think he has, Daddy? He's whittling." And it makes me laugh because that's exactly what I did at that age. I would disappear and I'd be like, mental health. I didn't realise mental health would I like whittling. So just got a great sense of going on a walk, bringing sticks back and whittling.
Oh, wow. Have you still got some of them, Ben?
No, I'm not glad of anything in my house. None of this stuff around me is mine. You look at my son's little bit of artwork, a bit of whittling there.
It's very cool.
Have you got like one of those men's sheds that you disappear down to for a whittle?
Yeah, that got burned down at the beginning of the summer, so I don't even have one of those down. I still think my wife's trying to get more space in the garden.
Please tell me that wasn't as a result.
It got burned down, darling.
Ben, please tell me that wasn't as a result of aggressive whittling.
Yeah,
created some spots.
You can't talk about that. Not in public. It's not.
That's not a phrase you often hear, is it? Aggressive whittling.
You'll be using it later on in the meeting, though. Aggressively whittle down his practice price. We So A-levels came. I knew it was going to be sciencey. It was only science, maths, chemistry, and biology. And then my dad, lucky enough, he dealt with majority of he's a senior account exec from NatWest, so he dealt with Take That's bank accounts and the football players, but he also dealt with a lot of the big high-powered medics of the time. So I was lucky enough to say, my dad said, look, what do you want to do? I'll get you some work experience. And when work experience came around, I went to stand in the guy who did the first cochlear implant in Manchester and sat and watched him do that. I fainted 3 times in the surgery. He found it hilarious that his bank manager's son was fainting in the surgery. He kept bringing me back in and I keeled back over again. So I thought that one might not be for me. He'd opened this guy's face up, removed all the bone, max fax, the maxilla, and was replumbing a muscle from the back into the face. Wow, and that was the first time I'd seen anything like gore or anything.
What an introduction.
And so I went around there and I went to a physio and I went to all that stuff. And then I went to watch a dentist and thought, hold on, all you do really is do what I do. I'm a social butterfly. I'm like you guys, 10-minute conversations. I can't think much more than that. It's all the insincerity pours out after 10 minutes and that sort of stuff. So 10 minutes in, I sat there and thought, hold on, he does a 10-minute cycle here and he's whittling. I remember in my head, and he's whittling for a living.
He's whittling teeth.
Yes, he's whittling. And I got to have a play around with this sort of stuff and have a go. And I went to an orthodontist and thought, I don't want to be a wirebender because they frighten me. They still frighten me, wirebenders. But I did know that, and so I thought dentistry. I thought I'd have a go, and the rest is sort of history, really.
Wow.
And it was a profession that served you well. But I think something that's interesting, you said at the very beginning, you're big on patient communication and behaviour change, and obviously, I mean that flows through to the work you do with the Oral Health Foundation. But going back to the beginning, where you were saying you are dyslexic, obviously writing and reading was challenging, but you're an outstanding communicator orally. Did you work out that was going to be kind of almost one of your superpowers, that I had to be really good at communicating with people in the way that suits me as a person, as opposed to in a traditional sense by writing? Because you are a great communicator. Was that a conscious decision to develop your skills in that way?
Yeah, I was very lucky because I do a lot of mentoring and stuff as well. And every one of my mentees, even one of my students from Manchester University, come back to me and say, what should I do? What should I do? I said, look, you've got to network. You've got to ignore what everybody else is doing in their little silos Our profession is very opinionated. Well, you might have guessed our profession is very opinionated about themselves. But actually, if you listen to other people and you realise the biggest thing is comms in every industry. It's not just dentistry. But you can, in fact, I actually ignore dentistry most of the time because I'll look at other industries. I'll look at hairdressing, which is our industry just on a different level. You know, they even do the same partnership agreements and that sort of stuff. It's exactly the same. And it's that comms. I look back to success stories, and it's 9 times out of 10 is who's rebranded so the customer understands what they're doing. And for me, that if you look at Apple, you look at anybody else, it's about it makes it intuitive. It's the easy way to buy it or easier to work with it. It's actually difficult not to purchase. But actually, comms is everything. It's everything in dentistry. It's learning about your body position, learning about sitting in front of the patient, learning about making sure they feel dominant in the surgery. So your head is below their head when you're talking to them. You're in front of them when you're talking. It's all the sales techniques you guys do. I'm with great respect. I'll probably ruin your market now, but it's that learning how to. One of my best friends, he's my PT. So we were chatting. He's absolutely. We were chatting 8 o'clock at night. He said, "Ben, what's the fastest way to become a millionaire?" We're laughing about this sort of stuff, and I said, "Well, don't spend it, because but it is, isn't it? It is. If you want to get out, put that money to work for you. I mean, with your investment arm, if you suddenly get a passive investment every year, put 20% away, then that money will compound and be the biggest investment you've had. The dental practices weren't mine when it sold. It was the buying houses and making sure that was working for me and getting a boring 10% return on every single house I've got. You know, it's that so boring journey. But for me, that comms thing is if you can actually say to a patient, what do you want? And they tell you, and then you give it to them. It's not difficult. But if you're spouting and constantly just talking, what quite frankly the majority of my profession does, that we don't listen. That behavioural change is so powerful, and you enjoy your job because, and it's that short term. And so, luckily enough, I went and was involved in the BDA very early on in my career, and I was lucky enough to get onto the rep body. I was a rep body 25, 26. So that's the board of the BDA, and I was a spokesperson. My first radio interview was when I was 24. I was on You and Yours on BBC You and Yours. I was 24. Wow. And that was my first ever interview. Not been on anything else. I got phoned up by Carmel from the BDA, and Carmel said, "Can you do that? Go into Manchester." Oh, okay, I tottled off into Oxford Road on the front there, got in one of these booths, and just suddenly went, "Oh my God, no one's telling me. I've never done anything like that. I've never done anything." But my mum comes out, "Who was it?" If I said You and Yours, she needed to drop the phone. You know, it's a proper political program about them. Little old idiot. But then I did some media training, and if I can get any dentist, and don't do a dental one, don't do how to communicate as a dentist. No. Go and just learn to talk. You know, go on I want to be on telly, and learn your 3 points. Learn how you're sitting forward, your body position and stuff. And I mean, obviously, I've judged you guys. You guys do that because this is your professional thing. I'm relaxed. It's not a problem for me. But it's
funny you say it, because as you say it all just sounds so obvious and natural. Why isn't everybody doing it? But it is layers of nuance, isn't it? Because we can all communicate, but some people are just more believable than others. Other people, you genuinely believe they care. Other people, it feels dispassionate. It feels like they're selling to you.
Yeah, false, doesn't it?
I was going to say the difference between it being it done well and not done well is incredibly subtle. But understanding those subtleties and mastering that as an art puts you on the path to success. And I don't mean financial success selling stuff. I just mean getting on with people and having a more fulfilling life and good interactions.
I think you're absolutely right there, Andy. It's the secret, and I'll tell you the secret. It's actually caring. Actually care for your patients. Actually go that extra mile. And think actually every day, can you choose one? Go an extra mile, give them a bell. Just make sure they're okay. And the smile you get when you go home. I remember one patient who came into my VT surgery, and I had the poxy little box, a box where you could walk sideways down the chair, either side, and actually get in. And the implant guy next door had this
big, massive,
next door. And I had a great PT, brilliant guy. But I used to remember this patient, this old dame walked up all the stairs. She's out of breath. You could see there was something else wrong. So she sat next. I said, "What?" I came on the front, sat and chat with her. "What's wrong?" And she said, "My cat's died." And her cat had died that morning. She said, "I thought I better still come out." I just said to my nurse, leaned into my ear and said, "Should I go and get her a piece of cake?" So we had a piece of cake in the surgery and rebooked the appointment. And I learned so much from my dental nurse by saying, "Ben, reel it back in again." Because oh my God, you're not going to get your denture finished today. The woman's cat's just died, who's the only person she sees every single day. And it was phenomenal. And this old dear just went, "Oh, I can't believe you've spent time." I said, no, it was Julie, my nurse. She told me I should.
Yeah.
And she laughed even more because of that. It was actually, I learned from people. And I think if you've got that, it comes back to time.
But also, I think truly caring, we all get, we send messages to people, we hear from people, we check in with people. I think if you care, you just care. And I think you care about your patients, you care about the people you work with, your family. You just care. And that's quite a hard thing to turn on and off. And like I say, there's that old chestnut, isn't there? People say they don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And it's that thing. The things you know are really useful. If people don't feel you're invested in
it's like we tell our guys to be interested. We said, I think the genuine difference that we can make to our guys is that, we might value hundreds of practices a year and we might do all this, but actually each one for that one person is really, really special. And the buyer is really, really special. And I think that we say to our team, don't we? You've got to remember that for that person, that's the most important thing. So be interested and be prepared when they get a little bit wobbly about something or whatever it might be, because actually it's just real life. It's actual people's emotions. It's a business, but actually it's an emotional thing that they're doing, whether they're buying or selling. So we have to understand that and care about them.
So
I bought my first practice from you guys, and just thought I'd tell you that. But your team made such a difference to my journey because I'd never done that before.
No, it's new, isn't it?
This was me, squeaky bum time, as a 24-year-old lad, my first practice, and I bought my practice, and your team guided me through the whole journey. They must have thought I was an absolute fool. But I didn't know anything. I was absolutely
right. Most people only ever buy one practice in their life. I mean, you're an exception, and we'll come on to your kind of business career in a second. But most people only ever buy one practice, and you're right. People keep apologising for the basic questions they're asking, but it's fine because if you don't know the answer, it's a valid question. So you're in the majority because most people don't go on to either buy or set up multiple practices like you did. Most people buy one practice. And that's their career. So on that point, you obviously had an incredibly successful business career in dentistry, and your career carries on. But just talk us through kind of that process from being an associate to kind of ending up with a group of practices and selling. Can you kind of distill that down into a few minutes for us?
It'd be interesting to go from when was number one. Well, obviously it's about 24 by sounds, but then when was number two?
Yeah, and then we couldn't do this. It might take a while. But,
we've got a while, so that's cool.
My first practice, I was working in a practice in Exton in the northwest of England, and my boss came to me and said, "Look, do you fancy buying in?" And I looked. Then I thought, hold on, I've not even thought about doing this. I might do it for a few years and see what happens because. I'll give it a go, which is generally the way I go things in life. You try everything once, don't you? Mm-hmm. But I then looked around all the practices and thought, you know what? I think I looked around about 200 practices. Ran over to Leeds, looked everywhere. I knew I was going to be in the northwest of England. I didn't really want to go to Manchester, to be perfectly honest, because I've come from Sheffield, and Sheffield is a town, whereas Manchester is this massive metropolis. And I thought, I'm never going to live in Manchester. They're all a bit. They're all a bit angry, and aggressive. And whereas Sheffield was so friendly, But I think that was because I was a child growing up, sort of grew up there from 18 to 23. But so I looked around all these practices and thought I walked into the one in Monton, and I thought I'm not gonna flat myself, so I haven't had that big risk.
Right, yeah.
Do you know, I had no risk. There was no mortgage.
Yeah.
There was nothing else. I was probably the richest I've ever been, and I'm probably the richest I've ever been since, actually, as a VT, because I had no expenses and I just had 20 grand to spend on pop and crisps. Do you know what I mean? And then everything else kicks in. It goes to 40 grand. It's still 10 grand. You know, not ever quite get back to that stage. And I was a single person, and you can suddenly start to learn how money works. You can earn 300 grand, but still be absolutely poor if you spent it all on fancy cars, and you can be absolutely skint. So I walked into this practice in Monton, and it felt right. You walked in, it was this is mine, I'm having this one, because it was a Victorian 5-bedroom property in Monton. If you don't know Manchester, it's in sunny Salford. It's the nicer area of Salford, social economically, but the whole high street was boarded up. You know, it was that period of late 90s. And there was a gun culture, you know, down in certain areas. One of friends' practices has been held up at gunpoint. So it was a bit sort of, but I wanted to move to Manchester because I was living with one of my friends in Manchester as well. And I thought, this place has got a flat above it. Right. It's got space to move on. The whole building includes 40 grand for a 5-bedroom semi-detached Victorian property, which now, if you go there now, you're talking $500,000 quid. You know, it's one of those journeys
really
that's just
developed.
got. Yeah. It's a fluke. It's an absolute fluke. Yeah. It was a single-handed practice. I'd never worked in a single-handed practice, and I thought, this happened. Spin that. So that was the first one. Then I got my Jeff, my first ever associate, who I'm still really good friends with. He came and lived with me in the flat upstairs, and we shared the surgery and turned the surgery from 8 in the morning till 8 at night every night. I did 8 till 8, so I didn't have to put the surgery in, and he did a late night, I did a late night, and then you just master. Then we put the second surgery in, and it spun out from there. But if you imagine, the surgery itself was wood chip on the walls everywhere, carpet everywhere. The patients were all sedated because there was no carbon monoxide flue on the gas fire in the waiting room.
Excellent.
Not even a faulty one. There just wasn't one.
Inbuilt sedation.
There wasn't central heating in the building. When all the walls were bowing on the building, so they all had to be broken down and repinned. The roof had to come off. It's one of those you sat there thinking, 40 grand, but it was a job to get the journey.
It was a project.
There was no level floors anywhere. Every ceiling sagged. But Mr. Hoy, who was the previous dentist, every single patient loved. Absolutely loved. And he was a communicator. He was a communicator. He actually wrote me a letter saying, "Thank you very much. I hear good things. Thank you very much for looking after my flock." Because he bought it from a second generation. I bought one off a guy it nearly broken him. And he had it for 3 or 4 years and then sold it on. And the stories where you think, actually, buying a practice might not be right for you. It was the done thing of my generation. Everyone did it.
Was that NHS private or mixture?
Oh, it was back in the days where the NHS was the NHS.
So it was just NHS.
And I was inheriting a list which was not my type of preventative dentistry. It was patch 'em up dentistry.
Right.
He's a good, brilliant dentists, but just a generation behind.
Yeah.
And probably how the generation now looks at my work. It was a lot of stuff, evolution things to do.
Yes, that would have been items of service, wouldn't it? I suppose at that time.
Yeah, sleeper item. And then what makes me laugh is when people hark back to items of service, and it's like, well, do you moan about that then? There's no right service because it's work. You've just got to make it work for you and look for the opportunities, which is what I suppose I excelled in, really, and sort of really kind of enjoyed that. For me, it's really important to. Then that practice grew. I went from my first. I suppose we'll start at the beginning. We had 1.5 full-time equivalents, and we turned into the business into 150 staff all over. So it was a journey. Sort of grew.
When did you step out on the second one then, Ben? After how long had you been doing the first one?
Well, my journey was a touch different than most. One of my biggest things in dentistry is if you moan about something, put your hand up and change it. But I don't do negativity because I think there's an opportunity there. If everybody else is moaning about something, there's an opportunity for you there. Every situation, There is no difference whatsoever. So the out of hours contracts came up for Stockport, Tameside and Glossop, Trafford, Central Manchester, not Salford, which made me laugh because I didn't have the practice there, and no one went for them. No one went for them, and that was the back in the day because there was no associates then. There literally wasn't any associates. It was a real struggle, and we set a system up where the out of hours patients from Greater Manchester came to Salford. Because no one else wanted the contract. So that jumped my service. So the practice then worked from 8 o'clock in the morning till 10 o'clock at night with emergency service. And we had 6 different sites using commissioning PCT services. And I can't remember what year that was. That would be 2004-05. So that's my second practice. And the practice then had grown to have 4 surgeries in cross-infection room, blah, 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 all that sort of journey. So that was a different journey. So it does look very similar to the world we're in now of the 10% flex commissioning. So, and I think there is going to be I know there's going to be a massive opportunity for dentists to say, actually, I want to manage my population budget rather than an NHS journey and say, well, actually, who do I want to treat with my NHS monies? And if you get that right, you can then grow your private tremendously as well.
Definitely, yeah.
So you can have your aesthetical world, which I think is a wonderful thing. It's boomed for our profession, but you can have the NHS. Don't lose that NHS journey because it can be a big opportunity when no one else wants it.
Yeah, I think that's right.
So that was sort of the next stage. Then I bought a practice in Bexley Square. It's the other end of Salford. It's 2 minutes walk from city centre Manchester. And John Breezeland's practice, I loved it. It was a practice that had been there for 100 years. It was next to the old courts. It had the biggest mix in societal practice I've ever come across. Low social economic up to top end high court judges. And I loved that. I loved that, treating everybody the same and not judging people, and those patients feeling that they weren't judged. And I'd go out, and that's the bit that I enjoy in dentistry. It's almost like people are expecting you to be quite judgmental because you're a dentist, and actually, and you walk out and they're shocked when you walk out and get the patient, and you sit down in the waiting room. My best moments in dentistry are sitting down in the waiting room chatting to my patients. And they don't know what you're doing, and you're sitting down chatting with them. They think you're running behind you, but you're absolutely on target with your time management. I've got 15 minutes here. I can flex in the day, but not the way where you start at 9:15. No, you start at 7:45. When everyone else is, it's. So that was sort of, we bought that practice, added a couple of surgeries in there, but that practice then started to focus on asylum seekers. So we used our NHS budgets to focus on asylum seekers, but increase the private area. So I could say to patients, no, I'm spending NHS monies in the correct area because I'm allowed to. Our list is shut, except for we will focus here, but you can consider it privately. But I think that's what we need to do as a profession. Start actually, if the government isn't going to control, have the confidence, this word again, the confidence to say, well, this NHS dentistry isn't for everybody. Well, we can do that because we can actually use the system correctly and actually really work with our patients to understand that, to understand the value. And that's what our trust, our growth, our opportunity is at the moment, to do that sort of thing. And there is a massive growth out there at the moment in the next generation. Because of COVID and the opportunity to hit these groups of patients, for example, my homeless area or asylum seekers or whoever you want, there is such a big opportunity where tremendous amount of diseases. We just need to tweak the way we work.
I think that's really clever and interesting that you're right. You can present the NHS services in a way to draw in the right sort of patients in the right social demographic with the right need. Because there are extraordinary numbers of people who could easily afford to purchase their dentistry privately, but perhaps access NHS dentistry because it's available. But I think from the dentistry side of things, there may be ways to configure it in a way which means it's pointed in front of the most needy people.
And that's where it should be targeted, really, isn't it? It should be targeted at people who can't afford it. That you look at those people who, I can remember during the COVID times, there was people, some guy died, didn't he, or something, because he got a brain abscess or something from a bad tooth or something. Those are real cases where the oral health of the nation can be truly affected by a lack of dentistry.
And it really does. And it really does. And when you meet these people, when you work with these people, you realise there was one kid who he had on. Oh, sorry, I'll go to the next stage. I thought it come later on. So then we thought we can do this out of our stuff, and we tendered for the Merseyside and Cheshire out of our area. And that ended up, we won that contract, and we ended up one stage looking at 3.8 million people's toothaches at the weekends. Under service, so we had a telephony service who triaged the patients, and the interesting stuff with my sort of public dental health hat on was the heat mapping of all the telephone calls that came in. You know, so we would heat map all the telephone calls onto Google Maps, and you could see the hotspots.
Oh wow,
and
that's interesting.
I was phenomenally interesting, and you could see there was only 2 places in Merseyside that needed it, without question. All our urgent stuff came from these 2 locations, and then we worked with the commissioners, and they reduced that noise in those areas.
Oh, really?
Don't get me wrong. There was still access problems. There was still, but the urgent, acute, look, we're getting 90 patients a day from these 2 areas. You need to deal with those. And the middle classes, there wasn't. But all the noise came from the middle classes because they knew how to. I had one patient who came in and I had to go out. I want to see the clinical director, blah, blah, blah. No, so you've chipped your front tooth. It's a Saturday. You're not in pain. You're not in acute pain. But last 2 times I had it done. I came here on a Saturday and they fixed it for me. So you've had this for the 3rd time. You any idea how many children you've stopped from who got toothache?
Yeah.
You know, so it's belief in that budget, what it's for, and understanding it. And I think there's some such positivity in the areas that we have at the moment in society that we can use this COVID economic journey to actually mould our NHS and how we think it should be used for. Yeah. And actually the patients will believe it, rather than, like you said, Chris, it's the I paid my stamp, this is what I'm entitled to. It's like, well, no, actually society is entitled to get the best value for money for the right area for dental should be.
Look wider than yourself.
And actually, the biggest challenge we've got is using the skills that I've learned from you guys, from the industry, marketing, and how to hit these probably 8% of the population who don't want to go to the dentist, who use A&E as their practice. We had one lady who, she came to our service 46 times in a year.
46 times?
46 times in a year. But she had mental health issues, and we needed that cog to turn back in. And so on Monday, and we worked with them, but we became almost a different issue. And these are the patients that fall through the net, Chris, and they're the ones that get the brain abscess because they can't access, they don't know how to access, they need a prioritisation. And so we have all the cogs there in the NHS. They're there. We just need to take 8 steps back and believe. The problem with society at the moment is we all are looking for that thing that's going to give us control and that change. The finances, the school fees, the kids going into school. I want to change school because they're not teaching little Johnny to do whatever. Well, actually, they're doing a really good job. We just need to let everything settle and slow down a little bit. NHS dentistry and dentistry is exactly the same. We just need the challenge. Yes, we've always had challenges in dentistry, but I think we can learn. So that was our opportunity thing. So we built those areas. That was in 12 different locations, working with different commissioning bodies, which was a challenge. And then we set at the same time we set a homeless service up in Ancoats. Something to do, isn't it?
Wow, flip.
So
there's a real social dynamic to all of that. Isn't there? It's interesting.
So you ended up with a group of 12 practices and the homeless venture.
We had 11 different dental contracts.
Right,
but there was 4 traditional practices, and then there was the out of hours and in-hours contract. We had an in-hours. We had an in-hours service over in Stockport that we ran as well.
And then, I mean, at this point, you're still a young guy, and then you sold out your group. So, and when did you sell? That was.
Well, I was. This is where people start hating me now. I was
28.
I was at 28. I've done right out the door. No, I talked to Manchester University as well during that period, lecturing, and I had a Dipsy in restorative as well. where we had a referral centre for complex patients and things, which I sat next to one of my heroes, who's Nick Gray, who's a professor at Manchester, who we were lucky enough. I've got a BDS. I haven't got any fancy letters after my name, but I was able to do all the really complex dentistry with a professor sat in the seat next to me. And that was NHS. There was no messing up. That was NHS referrals. There was nothing fancy, and it worked. And that's the flex. So I was in a ADG meeting, which is the union for the corporates, for listeners who don't know that. One of my passions is the industry and supporting industry and how it can affect a change within my profession. And I feel that often we dentists as a profession don't realise this massive support network that the BDIA does behind all the materials, the import, export, all that sort of stuff. And I was in a meeting, and they all came, all the different corporate chaps, all the directors come and said, well, if you're thinking of selling, just come to us before speaking to the likes of Andy and Chris. And so my wife and I sat down and said, what is the number to get out? What's our number to get out? Not being greedy, not wanting the Instagram lifestyle or all that sort of stuff. What was the number? And they offered us 30% more. So it comes back to that child with the pennies on the ferry. I couldn't risk that.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big learning thing that we did from that. We said, look, we've got an amazing lifestyle. The kids are set for life, unless they're watching this and podcast, and they've got to work very hard, and they're not going to see a penny of it. That we can't roll that dice, and that was 6 months before COVID hit. We sold.
Wow.
That was 6 months before COVID hit, so there was a lot of guilt from me during the COVID period, because I would have been in the thick of it. I would have been running UDCs all across the northwest of England. It would have been a journey, and. So no,
what's nice in there, Ben, is we talk a lot about so many people not understanding what enough is. People just constantly chasing more and more and more. True. And it's lovely to hear that you and your wife sat down and you actually did kind of the calculation, and it probably wasn't just a numeric financial calculation about what enough was, and it meant you'd done enough in terms of what you'd grown. It was enough in terms of the money. And it was enough of your time and yourself, which then, going back to the very beginning about your throwaway comment about being a stay-at-home dad, it created so much more beyond the money that it gave you. And I guess it also frees you up, because I know you love restoring old sports cars. You do distance running. You're into beekeeping. You're still a media spokesman for the Oral Health Foundation. It's not that you're short of things that you're certainly keeping yourself busy, but you also mentioned about the homeless work, the dentistry for homeless people, and that's an ongoing project, isn't it? How's that coming along?
Yeah, it's going really well. I was on a conference with one of my sort of big passions is behavioural change for our profession, to take a step back and say, I've got an idea. I want to treat the homeless. We all want to. It's almost fashionable, but I don't know where to start. But what I want to do is create almost like a framework that people go, oh, actually, I can take this to the commissioners, or I can speak to you and do this. So they've just almost, I know they've copied our sort of model for sessional rate over in Leeds, and they've opened 2 practices up focusing on the hard to reach group. So that's a flex contract. And I was on a conference call yesterday with the Inclusive Network, which is all the public health people, and Natalie from DentAid. And it's an amazing journey that we can change how we treat, and the young generation has to change. And we've got to look at what we can do to give back, because I think there's a big need for our profession to maybe have a whitewash. I think the opportunity we have is now. The BDA have done an amazing job in getting dentistry into Parliament to be discussed. It's never been discussed as much as it has. So patients now are aware of the contractual issues. But I actually think we are now this opportunity. We can actually affect a change and say, actually, the government's not going to do it, so we're just going to do it anyway. Well, it'll financially, we'll sort it. That money will follow. But we are a truly amazing profession, and we need to start talking about it and how we have changed things and how we have done that, and how when I say the profession, I do mean the industry supporting as a whole, that we can make such a difference into society. I was down at Peninsula helping one of the dental schools down there, and all the students do a program that they do outreach they're meant to be hard to reach services, but I actually say they're hard to access. They find it hard to access service. So they went to 10 different things. There was a working men's club where all the ex-sailors' wives had died. So they were of that generation, of our parents' generation, where the women ran the home and the men went out to work in the sea. But their wives had died and they didn't know how to brush their teeth. So they didn't know anything of those. So they were in a really bad way. And the students went out and did a project on that. And the one that really hit home was Bernardo's have got a group of children who the children are the carers for their parents.
Right.
So the 7, 8, 9-year-olds caring for their parents.
Wow.
And in Plymouth, there's 900 of these children.
Jeez.
Yeah, so it's not just the odd one. It's not a little charity thing. This is so when we're looking at population, and no one looks after them. So Bernardo's do, and it's such an amazing. The work it brought tears to your eyes. But as a dentist, for me, I've always said we should be prioritizing these patients. We should be just skip the queue, bring them in.
Yeah.
So that's sort of the exciting world I'm in. Yeah. Yeah.
That's great work.
So yeah.
You're not short of things to keep you busy and going on. But what makes you happiest? What's the thing of the things you have done or are doing that really puts a smile on your face and brings contentment?
Time with my children. But actually me being present, and that's a fight I have. Because I used to be Ben Atkins, and now my role is, I've changed the way. I used to get up at 5 o'clock and do my exercise then, and I'll still do occasionally do my long runs and things early morning. But this morning I sat down with the kids, and whilst they were having breakfast, I sat down and had a cup of coffee and chatted to my daughter. And I sat in the back of the car whilst my wife was driving in the front. We have a competition to see Jodrell Bank. We're going to, whoever sees it first wins. And I was chatting to my daughter in the back, pointing it out. We're having a laugh, and we were pretending we were seeing rabbits, the guys in the front. But having those moments, that's what makes me actually happy. And it's taken probably 3.5, 4 years since the business has gone to give myself permission to do that. Yeah. And I'll still struggle with that mental health side for me. Creation of value, but not somebody else's values, and being me to be me. I struggle with that.
The thing is, you started very early in your career, and you were running hard for 15 years. So it's hard to suddenly then just switch that off and say, actually,
turn it off,
I'm now just going to slow down and have this easier paced, different prioritization in my life, and suddenly that just work overnight. I don't think that's who we are, because to have the success you had over that short period of time requires complete and utter commitment, and you got an amazing end result, which I'm so pleased for you. But that brings challenges in that when you then move on to the next phase of your life, you need to work out what that looks like. And that sounds like kind of what you're working through now. It is. It's giving myself permission not to do anything. And it's a bizarre work, because I have been running. It's almost my job was to have that ball and run, and then think people to catch up. And my management team did all that. They did all the work. Every practice had its manager. Every practice had a senior nurse. Every team had a spare member of staff in succession planning for when the nightmare things happen, and they do. That's the only thing I can guarantee. But I'm still trying to plan that in my own personal life. And I realize that the key thing is personal, and I struggle with that. I really do, being useful.
They're so interconnected, aren't they? That's the thing. Yeah.
Where does beekeeping fit into all this?
beekeeping is one of the only things out of my life that I can't rush.
Yeah,
and that's why I got into it. This was pre-kids, 15 years ago or so. And I remember going on. I've got the books, the typical bloke thing: books, toys, spent money on it, and suddenly these bees arrived, and they arrived in a box in the post. 3,000 bees,
in the post.
They come through the post.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the same look that most people get.
A box of bees.
Box of bees. Yeah, they were like traditional beekeeping frames.
Yeah.
Were fixed in a mini beehive in the post. And I ran upstairs to my bedroom. My wife was in bed. Look, they've arrived!
And
you just heard this.
They came special bee livery.
Oh,
apologies to that.
And on that note, we end the interview, and they arrived, and I like it because
so you got big numbers on the socks that says "Do not open" in your house.
No, it did. Yeah, it had a danger. Bees.
Yeah, I'd imagine it must have something on it.
And the postman just walked to the door thinking. It was the whole package was buzzing. It was literally roaring.
Can you imagine that?
Wow,
at least no one's going to nick that like they do some of your Amazon parcels.
No, not really. Left that one left. That'll be there for a while.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, but I enjoy it because. I'll leave you two to chat about bee jokes. We're
going to think as many bee jokes as we can.
Yeah. Bring me back into the interview when you finish.
Right. And I assume you do harvest honey.
Yeah, so do you get the honey?
Yeah, we got about 1/2 ton this year.
1/2 ton?
And what does that distill down to in terms of numbers of jars?
Or bees?
Oh, 800-900 jars, something like that.
How many bees do you need for 1/2 ton of honey?
We've got about 15 hives. Each one will have 40,000 bees in its correct level. So, yeah.
Are they at the end of your garden, or are they like a special bit of land that's nowhere near your house?
One has a field, darling. They're at the bottom of the field.
Is that where your special bees are in the field? Because you wouldn't want around your house, would you?
No. Oh, no, we do. I've got 3 or 4 hives dotted around the garden and stuff.
So what, you sell that through local shops in the area?
That's the interesting part. Is my children? We bottle them up. Wait for a second.
You sell it to local hay fever sufferers, isn't that supposed to be what?
But it's fascinating, isn't it? That
1/2 ton of honey is quite a lot.
I was going to say, just a simple story of they turn up in the post. Yeah, 15 hives, you get 1/2 ton of honey, and you end up with hundreds of jars of honey.
Oh, look at that!
So that's
a set one and a runny one.
Yeah, that one is spring honey. That one is summer honey. Different honey from different times. But it's the kids label them up and they sell them up at school. And when I say they sell them, a lot mostly get given away. And basically, we create money for a food bank near us, and the kids go and take the money.
That is brilliant
and stuff.
Fabulous.
So it is quite amusing. When my daughter the other day, bless her, so we've done this a few times.
And do they help you with the bees?
Yeah. They pour it all out. They label it up. They design the labels and all that sort of stuff. And my daughter's very entrepreneurial because she leant over and said, "Daddy, I don't want to give it all to charity. Can I keep some of the money?" And I was just like, that's what I want. I want to instill that entrepreneurism in with them.
Yeah.
They can do. So I've one of the local shops. There's a Swedish bakers near us, cafe, and she said she'll stock it up and sell it there for them. So she's going to get the kids to do the negotiation and that sort of thing. That's and if I get them running a very small little business to understand the P&L stuff, is maths.
Great idea.
I think stuff like that. You can read books, you can watch YouTube clips, and people tell you on TikTok how to do it. It's nothing like doing it yourself. On a scale like that, where you understand what it costs you to produce it, what someone's going to sell it for, what the margin is, all those things in real life are so valuable.
So the exciting thing this afternoon is I get my new wax builder. Wow, so wait for a second.
Look at this. We need a whole nother episode.
The beekeeping.
The bee episode.
With as many bee puns as we can think of. That would be amazing.
But also, just for the people that obviously are watching this on YouTube, it's great. But if you're not watching on YouTube, Ben showed us 2 different jars of honey.
Oh yeah, one was hard.
When they were harvesting, one was a clear honey and one was a very dark
A set honey.
A dark set honey, yeah. Sorry, Ben, you're back.
Yeah, and this is one of the kids' candles. So they make candles.
Oh, wow.
Oh,
That's pretty cool.
That's our bee.
Beautiful.
That's our wax. So this afternoon I've got a new wax melter coming, so I'm very excited by that.
Wow.
So you can clearly see the honeycomb. So I think as a complete different side to what you're doing, but also bringing your kids into it. Very, very smart indeed.
Yeah.
Ben, honestly, we could talk all day.
That's brilliant.
I mean,
did it again. My last bee joke.
Yeah. we could.
I'm so happy as well there, Chris. Your head's got so
That's the only problem is once you start on something like that, you're now thinking it's like when we do like we used to do a course where we try to do ABBA songs.
Yeah.
And basically when we were then doing them, it just turned into this sort of like, most of the time we were just trying to think of our next ABBA song, and then occasionally someone with the audience would ruin it because they'd come up with the same song, and it's like, oh man, come on, we've been thinking so long.
Ben, we always wrap up in the same way with our guests. We always ask the same two questions. So the first question we'd like to ask you is, if you could be a fly on the wall with somebody in a certain situation, when would that be and who?
That should be a bee on the wall.
Yeah, not a fly on the wall, but a bee.
It's one of those you're meant to find out someone who's interesting and that sort of stuff. But there was a guy called Mr. Letch at Sheffield University who was an inspiration to us all. He never had anything negative to say. He was always positive, and I took a lot from that. So I'd love to see him talking to me as an undergrad. That little, because he was harsh a couple of times, but he had this amazing ability to watch people and feel that journey. Wow. That was an art we talked about earlier on. I took a lot of, and I'm wondering if I would love to see him again as that.
That would be a bit like, you're an Arsenal fan. Have you seen that time when Ian Wright meets his school teacher?
Yeah, I saw that.
That's amazing, isn't that sort of thing? Oh wow, you believed in me, you thought, and out of that came Ian Wright.
But those lollipop moments, those small moments that we just kind of move on from, we don't necessarily know the impact they have. Yeah. But obviously that lecturer had a massive impact, because you remember him to this day, and he's somebody you'd like to go roll back all those years and see again, which is lovely. And if you could meet somebody, if you were given the opportunity to sit down with a glass of wine or a coffee and meet somebody, who would you like to meet?
Isn't that funny, those things? Is I do get to meet people. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? You don't like name dropping and stuff, but you sort of meet someone, you go, oh, really? That is that sort of thing. The person the rich dad, poor dad guy, I'd really like to sit down and have a proper conversation with him, Richard Kobayashi or whatever his because his book, that Rich Dad Poor Dad book, has actually affected my financial life, the good debt and bad debt, and understanding how investments work and stuff. So I'd love to have a conversation with him, because he has influenced me and maybe freely, I suppose.
Yeah. Brilliant. Ben, you've been a superstar. You're so laid back and nonchalant about the success you've had. I think it's a terrific story. I think people will take stacks from it. And you're really honest about, it not always being easy, and you're still so early on in life. I think there's going to be a shed load more stuff coming from you in dentistry and outside of dentistry. It's been wonderful. We appreciate your time.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you very much.
Okay. See you and speak to you soon. I'll see you soon.
Lovely.
Cheers, Ben. Thank you, man.
Cheers, Ben.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Dentology, where we discuss the business of dentistry. If you like what you heard, please do subscribe where you found this episode. That would be amazing. And also follow us on Instagram.